Awakening 101, guiding the rise of our planets, embrace divine wisdom, and discover the deeper power within your soul. Today I have a special guest. She is awakening coach, meditation teacher, as well as an author, no other than Miss Holly Copeland.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for having me on. I'm just delighted to be here.
Welcome, welcome, Miss Holly on Spiritual Awakening 101. And can you please introduce more by yourself that I missed?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am delighted to be here with you. As Daniel said, I'm an awakening coach, meditation teacher, and author. But I come here from a 25-year career as a scientist for a leading conservation organization. And so my background is actually in ecology and a deep passion for the environment and environmental conservation. And through my spiritual transformational journey over the past 8 years, I ended up leaving that job and I ended up coming to places like this, writing a book about that transformation because I deeply came to understand that the solution to our environmental crisis actually begins with each of us and in reconnecting to the peace of nature within what I call inner rewilding, which is the topic of my book, Inner Rewilding.
Miss Holly, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about something good. You spent 25 years trying to save wild landscape and conservative scientists. Then you hit burnout, illness, and heartbreak for the planet. What is the specific moment or realization that made you understand that science on its own could save humanity on Earth?
Well, it was a series of awakenings, Daniel. It wasn't one specific moment, but I do remember a few key moments. And so, one that I'll share here was I realized that I did this little kind of mental game with myself. I was out on a walk and I realized, wait, if I was the very best environmental scientist in the world, like let's say I was the Mother Teresa of environmental scientists and I like saved 50% of all the species on the earth single-handedly, would I still feel successful? And I realized the answer was no, because I just would move on to the next thing and there would still be the remaining 50% of species and environments that were suffering. And what that mental game did for me was it made me realize that there was an inner sense of not enoughness that was behind my sadness and exhaustion and burnout. And that no external solution, in other words, being the very best of the best of the best who'd ever lived, would have actually solved my inner sense of enoughness. And so by realizing that, I realized that the enoughness problem wasn't a doing problem, it was a being problem. I had to come back into how can I be as a human and feel like I'm enough in my life? I'm like enough here. And that's a deeply spiritual journey. And that's one of the ones that really impacted me that I ended up through my spiritual practices and plant medicine and the things that I did, came to understand that I was holding a belief of not enoughness, and that was one of the core components of my own suffering.
Very well said, Miss Holly. And you said that caring for the earth is caring for ourselves are not separate. For listeners who have been taught that environmentalist is about data, policy, and action, not inner work, what does it mean to say that ecological crisis is also a spiritual crisis?
It means that where we feel the pain and the grief and the sadness about the planet, that we are being invited to confront that at an inner level, not an outer level. So, not by more, if I just work harder, then I'll feel better. And that's not the solution. And it's not that any of those things that people are doing are bad things. They are wonderful things to do. So please understand, if you're somebody who's listening who is an activist, it it is that those things are beautiful things to do. But the invitation is to look at our own sadness and grief and despair as actually the first answer to the problem, not a consequence of it, but the root of the problem. The root of the problem, and the reason that we have the world we see today with all the environmental crises, is because we are disconnected internally. Somewhere along the way, as we colonized and wiped out indigenous cultures, as we forgot what it meant to live in a way that uh, preserved our interconnectedness with all life through ancient practices like meditation, and through practices that indigenous cultures teach, like drumming and music and all the things that make us come alive inside and bring us into a sense of deep inner peace and connectedness. That when we left those things aside and began to be industrial people, that that is actually the reason that we created the environment that we see today. So we need to go back to those original practices that bring that interconnectedness and inner harmony. We need to rekindle those for each of us in order to create this beautiful, thriving, flourishing planet that we want to live in. So it is an invitation for every person who feels sad and lost and hopeless to confront that through inner practice. And that's what I teach, are the practices, and there's many ways to do it. It's not just my practices, because there's many beautiful spiritual practices. However, whichever ones resonate with you, wherever your lineage is, whether it's a qigong practice, or it's a Taoist practice, or it's a Tibetan practice, or it's a Hindu practice, it doesn't matter. Like, they're all really doing the same thing. They're bringing us back into inner harmony. But my message is about seeing those practices and taking them seriously as a solution to our environmental crisis.
Well done, Miss Holly. You've coined the term inner rewilding.
Mhm.
Define it for us, not as a concept, but as an experience. What
Sure.
actually happens to a person when they begin to reconnect with the wild intelligence of their own being?
I would love to. So let me just frame the inner rewilding, because I coined this term because, as an ecologist, I there's a term, rewilding, and what it means is it's a way of transforming our altered human landscapes back to their wild nature. And that's, in ecology, that's called rewilding. And so I took that term from ecology and my background and said, "Oh, but it's really the same thing. We're just doing it on the inside instead of the outside. We're coming back and reclaiming our inner peace and well-being." And that's the essence of inner rewilding. It's a reclamation and a knowing that peace is your natural state. It's not something that you have to, it's not a state of being that comes and goes with whether or not your house is messy, or your kids are screaming, or there's a lot of noise in a city. Those are external things. True internal peace does not come and go with those experiences. It's a kind of, the experience, to answer your question very directly, is a kind of being the eye of the hurricane. So the hurricane can be around us spinning, but there's a centered, calm peace. That's how I experience it. There's a connection with something deeper, with a peace that doesn't come and go with experience. That's the difference. And that's how you know that you have, you know, landed there. And that's the essence of what I teach and share in my book.
Well said again, Miss Holly. You said that showing down and listening deeply is not you giving up on the world. It is the most radical thing we can do. Why is slowing down radical in a culture that demands constant action? And what does listening deeply actually sound like?
It sounds like having the clarity to pause in the middle of somebody else's chaos and sit with them in their chaos and be okay. Like, whether you're angry at me or not is a you problem, not a me problem, you know? And if I can sit in my own, if I can sit in the peace of my being, it doesn't mean I'm not listening. It doesn't mean I'm spiritual bypassing. Like, I can take all that in. Maybe I do choose to respond in a different way based on how you know, what you're the information I receive. And so I take that in, but my come from is a place of deep inner peace. It's not a place of reactive anger or, you know, yeah, jealousy or envy or any of those kinds of things.
Miss Holly, you experienced burnout and illness after a decade of conservation work. What does heartbreak for the planet feel like in the body, and how do your physical symptoms become messengers that lead you toward inner rewilding rather than away from it?
That's a great question, Daniel. I mean, it would, for different people, you'd experience it probably slightly differently, but I'll share my experience for you. So, for me, that inner despair and chaos comes as constriction. So it comes as a lot of heaviness in my heart and loss of vitality and exhaustion, tiredness, and then I got mold poisoning. So I was dealing with that as well, which I now believe was because everything as you well know, with spiritual teachings, everything is interconnected. So my understanding was that at some level, my spirit called that mold in for me to learn about air quality and the lungs and the way that humanity has been, you know, chopping down our forests, which are basically the lungs of the planet. And so it was a recognition of the interconnectedness of our physical body with the planet. And so now I'm deeply committed to trees and tree conservation and reconnecting with trees because I see them as our great teachers and as the lungs of the planet. Um, so, yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Indeed, Miss Holly, and many environmentalists and activists are carrying profound grief, despair, and echo anxiety. How do you distinguish between healthy grief and burnout, and what happens when we don't make it distinction?
Mm, healthy grief and burnout. Yeah. So, good question. So,
Thank you.
healthy grief is um, the release of any, you know, of an experience of the emotion, you know, grief is just a stored emotion in the body, and absolutely the expression of that is vital, because if we hold on to that energetically, then we're just going to keep passing it around in the body, and it's here to teach us, right? We can actually view these emotions as our teachers of learning, you know. I love Joseph Campbell's quote, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And so he's pointing to the importance of facing the things we fear to face, where to start to get curious. Grief can be our teacher, to be curious as a pointer into that which we deeply love, and then understanding what is it that's keeping us separate from feeling that love. So um I uh it's just a matter of honoring all the emotions that are arising and learning from them, not needing to make them go away, but considering them as our teachers. And when we shift a view to seeing them as our teachers and we start to get curious about these emotions, then what also happens is they, like a baby that's crying, we're tending to them now. And so they won't keep crying because they're being tended to. And they will begin to teach us, and we can learn from them. And now we're on the spiritual journey itself. So it's like that. It's just, tending to them like a baby.
Miss Holly, for a listener who's deeply rational, skeptical, or a science trained, someone who is hears biofuel turning into a plant medicine and immediately checks out, what's your invitation to them? Is there doorway into an inner rewilding that does not require them to adopt belief that feeling foreign?
Beautiful question. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, again, as a scientist and married to an engineer for a long time, formerly, I appreciate the question and the perspective. Look, no spiritual belief is actually needed for this transformation. What's needed is for you to become your own scientist, to take how you're feeling and what you're experiencing as your doorway. And the thing about scientist rational mind is that it actually keeps you in a kind of thought based way of knowing. And oh, a core part of what I teach and share is how to learn to be like right now, and to do this without belief. So right now, even the most skeptical scientist, doesn't matter, this is not a belief dependent experience, you are aware, right? Something or is knowing and can hear these words. You don't need a thought to know the words that I'm speaking to you, right? Well, we might call that consciousness, the conscious awareness that is aware. And that awareness or consciousness that you experience is a doorway into deep spiritual truth, whether you realize it or not. And no belief is actually needed, just like no belief is needed to experience consciousness. So I take a very, let's look at your current, and when I work with people and in the meditations I guide, many of them are based on just examining, like a scientist, your experience. And it is an N of one for the scientists in the that are listening, but um, we've been trained in a way to devalue our current experience. And this is an invitation to actually get curious, the way that scientists, that you probably got into science in the beginning because you have a lot of curiosity about the world, as I did when I was a child. I was always asking questions. Why this? Why that? So these people that are scientists naturally want to know and understand the world. We share that understanding and knowing about the world. And so this approach isn't dependent upon a belief. It's dependent upon you setting aside dogma, because science can actually be a kind of dogma, and just start to be curious about your experience. And there's beautiful ways to explore that without getting into belief or needing to talk to you about whether you believe any of this or not.
Miss Holly, you said that you don't need saving. No one of us do. We need homecoming. What is the difference between being saved and coming home?
Hmm.
And why does the distinction matter for how we approach both personal healing and ecological action?
Mm, another great question. Gosh.
Thank you.
Um, yeah. So there's two things happening right now. There's a relative world and uh, uh, there's a relative reality and there's a transcendent reality. The transcendent reality, pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure Rigpa, whatever you want to call it, non-dual, it does not have distinguishing between good and bad, good and evil. And this was something that was very hard for my mental body and mind that loves to question to understand. But realizing that at the ultimate level, there is an interconnectedness, a non-duality, a all pervasive, um, no separation is another way it's put, ultimate reality. And in that ultimate reality, everything is whole. And if everything is whole, then nothing needs saving. Then we are all always being held by something, source, consciousness. Um, all the spiritual traditions have different names for it. God could be another, right? Is holding everything. Um, and in that sense, from that view, not only is everything, if everything is God, then God doesn't need saving because God is everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the paradox is that we are experiencing, it's a both and. We are experiencing a reality. We live in an ultimate reality. I'm going to use that word, ultimate and relative. We live in an ultimate reality of source, God divine, in which everything is already whole and everything is already okay. And at the same time, we are having a relative experience right now because in order for us to exist, God had to appear to separate into a you and a me. And so the great spiritual understanding is to be able to hold both at the same time, to not be caught in one or the other. So if we're caught in ultimate reality too much, we can lose our grounding to just do anything at all and participate and be in this participatory universe. And if we only live in relative reality, we are completely caught in with good and evil and the the kind of overwhelm that that creates. And so um, it is a kind of paradox that that is part of the spiritual world to live in and recognize both. It's a both and, but ultimately holding what for me is, I'm just going to go back to the ultimate reality. What's so important in the recognition of that interconnectedness of non-saving is that it allows us to hold the apparent relative reality, the relative reality we're experiencing, with a kind of lightness and trust and humility, that all is truly okay at the deepest level. And um, that none of us needs saving. We're all already whole. We are made in the light of the Creator, if you will. We are that. Yeah.
Beautifully articulated, Miss Holly. And to wrap up our discussion for today, what one small possible practice you would invite every listeners or viewers to try this week? Something that costs nothing, requires no special training, and begins the process of inner rewilding from whatever they are right now.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. My favorite single practice to help you shift into inner rewilding is to begin to teach yourself how to move from the thinker behind the eyes into the heart space. And so let's do this together. I'm going to show you my way of guiding this. If it helps, if you're not driving or walking somewhere, you can participate either way. But if you're sitting somewhere, you can close your eyes. If not, just kind of soften your gaze a little bit. See if you can just kind of soften the pointedness and take in the landscape if your eyes are open. Okay. And then notice this sort of sense of a me that sits behind the eyes for most people. There's a perspective of a me in here and a world out there that for most people is located behind the eyes. And what I want you to do is just number one, notice it. And then we're going to move that. We're going to notice that we can actually shift down into the heart space. So I'm going to invite you to just begin to drop that center of awareness down into your jaw, just noticing and sensing your jaw from within your jaw. Drop it into your neck, noticing and sensing your neck from within. Drop it down into your shoulders, noticing and sensing your shoulders from within. And then lastly, dropping into your heart, feeling and sensing the space of your heart from within. And notice I'm not asking you to think about your heart. I'm asking you to feel a kind of local awareness centered in your heart, like direct knowing your heart space from within. And then here's the key. If your eyes are closed, when you open them, I want you to open them as though you're looking out from the eyes of your heart. If your heart had eyes, have your heart be the one looking out at the world. If your eyes are open already and you didn't close them, same thing. Just feel that you're seeing the world with the eyes of your heart. And now notice, how has that changed your experience? What does it feel like to look at the world in this new way from behind your heart, from inside your heart? And I'll ask you, Daniel, what do you notice here?
I think you feel more calm, compassionate, and you're defining the moment that you are being in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more compassionate. Do you also feel it's like a softer way of being? Yeah,
Mm,
that's what
yes.
I experienced
The,
too. The
s-
world, it feels softer. The world feels softer, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
The softness of environment, our surrounding is there.
Hmm.
So, Miss Holly, can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your coaching, or anything you want to promote on spiritual awakening?
Thank you so much, Daniel. Well, yes, as you've shared, I have a book, Inner Rewilding, on Amazon, and you can go to my website, hollycopeland.co, where you could book a free discovery call with me if you're interested in one-on-one mentorship in the spiritual guidance. I also am on social media, and you can find links there on Substack. And I have lots of meditations on Insight Timer if you are on that platform. Polly Erin Copeland, you can find me there.
Yes, people, let's connect with Miss Holly Copeland because if you connected with her, for sure, more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering coaching to rise. So, Miss Holly, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate the invitation.
What can people see you soon?